The transport rattled hard enough to knock Reese Calder's coffee out of its magnetic holder and onto the grimy metal floor. The cup rolled and clattered somewhere under the bench. No one moved to help. They were all too used to the sounds of shaking, groaning bolts and impending mechanical failure to bother. Besides, everyone knew Calder would drink recycled coolant before asking for help. "This ship's older than the war," muttered Private Silo, pulling her helmet tighter. "It creaks like my ex's spine," added Jenkins from the other side, earning a few tired chuckles. Reese said nothing. His eyes were locked on the display mounted above the rear hatch. Coordinates flickered across the screen, slowly zeroing in on a blinking red grid. Extraction point confirmed. The canyon where they were headed was called X-17, but the soldiers called it the Jaw. Rumors said it ate men and metal and spat out ghosts. The mission brief had been frustratingly vague. Intercept a downed Ilari vessel, secure any survivors, and assess possible intel recovery. The brass didn't even pretend to dress it up. It was a clean-up op, the kind that usually ended in silence and a body bag. The lights above blinked from red to green. The ramp dropped. Heat blasted inside, dry and acrid, with a sharp bite of scorched ozone. Reese was first out, rifle raised, boots crunching on the burnt stone. Behind him, the squad fanned out with synchronized efficiency, checking cliffs, ridges, and the skeletal remains of alien machinery. The Ilari vessel was a wreck of obsidian alloy and splintered glass, half buried in the red dust. Its hull shimmered faintly with residual energy. Standard anti-scavenger tech, harmless now. Reese approached with caution, motioning for Corporal Venn to sweep for heat signatures. The scanner beeped. 3 life forms. 2 weak, 1 stable, Venn confirmed, eyes narrowing. "That's odd. Ilari don't usually crash without exploding for dramatic effect." "Maybe they ran out of budget," Reese muttered. He left a message for command. No response came for hours. That night, while the base powered down to sleep mode, Reese returned to the observation deck. Jenkins was leaning against the wall, eating a protein bar that smelled like regret and disappointment. "She still hasn't said a word," Jenkins said through a full mouth. "I think she's trying to kill us all with awkward silence." "I've seen worse," Reese replied. "Worse than what? An intergalactic space elf with laser eyes and the personality of a cliff?" Reese watched her through the glass. "Yeah, worse." Jenkins crumpled the wrapper. "You're staring too long, sir. Starting to get the wrong idea." Reese didn't reply. The alien woman opened her eyes then, as if she'd sensed him, their gazes locked. "I think she likes you," Jenkins whispered. Reese kept his voice even. "Go find something useful to do before I reassign you to waste processor cleaning." Jenkins saluted with mock enthusiasm and left. Reese stayed. Something in those eyes made his stomach twist. Not fear, not attraction, but the haunting familiarity of someone who's seen too much and said too little for far too long. "You're not what I expected," he muttered under his breath. The lights flickered. A storm on the upper atmosphere rattled the base's shielding. He looked away. When he looked back, she was still staring at him. And maybe, just maybe, there was the slightest lift at the corner of her lips. A twitch, a flicker, almost a smile. The blackout started with a whisper. Not a dramatic explosion, not a siren, just the hum of the base's environmental systems slowing to a halt. Like a tired giant exhaling for the last time. The lights dimmed, flickered once, and died. Silence settled in the corridors, punctuated only by confused mutters and the occasional loud curse from someone who stubbed a toe against military-grade furniture. Reese stood in the corridor outside the holding cells, holding a tray with 2 cups of synth coffee and a datapad now as useful as a wet match in a vacuum. Emergency red lights kicked in, casting a low, eerie glow over everything. He stared at the door controls, now locked in manual mode. Behind the transparent barrier, Caliph didn't move. Her figure was still seated on the floor, legs folded, spine rigid. He tapped on the glass with the side of the coffee cup. "Guess what?" he said, voice loud enough to carry through the partition. "They cut power to the whole block just to keep us in suspense. I respect the drama." She didn't respond. "Of course." Reese looked down the hall. No techs, no guards. Most had probably retreated to the main barracks while they rebooted the backup systems. The silence was thicker than usual. He tapped the console out of habit, got a crackle of static and a low warning tone. Dead controls. And then, just because the universe enjoyed proving it hated him, the maglocks disengaged. The door to Kaylee's cell hissed and slid halfway open before halting. A klaxon gave a tired squawk and died. Reese stared at the opening. That shouldn't have happened. Kaleth didn't move. I'm going to go out on a limb. I've heard Terran soldiers before, she said. Most sound like machines with skin. You try to sound human. I'm flattered, I think. I didn't say you succeeded. He narrowed his eyes. You crash your ship, nearly die, get captured by the enemy, and the first thing you do is mock their sense of humor? It's all I have left. Reese hesitated. The edge in her voice wasn't sharp. It was hollow, a blade dulled by use, not intention. He shifted slightly, motioned toward the door. Well, since we're bonding, how about we wait out the power failure somewhere less cell-shaped? I could kill you and leave. You could try. I'm told I'm disappointingly durable. She looked at the opening, then back at him. Why aren't you afraid of me? Because you're cuffed, tired, injured, and because I've seen worse. Once had to share a drop pod with Jenkins after taco night. That was trauma. Kaleth blinked once. A slow exhale left her lips. Almost a sigh of amusement. They stepped into the corridor together, the red lights throwing long shadows behind them. Somewhere in the distance, someone tripped over a power cable and cursed in 4 languages. Reese guided her toward the auxiliary common room, one of the few spots with manual overrides and actual chairs. Inside, the place was lit by a few glow sticks duct taped to the ceiling. A poker table had been overturned, and someone had left behind a half-eaten ration pack labeled Chicken-Type Flavor B. Kaleth eyed the label. Your species eats these voluntarily? Reese shrugged. We lost the actual chickens years ago. Now we just replicate the regret. She sat across from him. He handed her the less spilled coffee. She took it, sipped, and winced. You were right. This is terrible. Reese smiled. You didn't have to agree so quickly. I've learned to identify poison. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt settled, not strained. Reese glanced at her restraints. If I remove those, are you going to decapitate me with your knees? Unlikely. That's not a no. She extended her hands. He hesitated, then unclipped the dampeners. The cuffs dropped. She flexed her fingers once, watching him the entire time. He didn't flinch. So, he said, leaning back, want to tell me why an Alari vanguard with 3 confirmed kills on a record let herself be taken prisoner without resistance? I was done, she said simply. Done fighting? Done watching people I cared about die. Reese nodded slowly. Yeah, been there. She looked at him. Then why are you still fighting? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I think I forgot how to stop. Kaylee's expression softened. Not quite sympathy, but the ghost of understanding. She raised her cup again. I still hate the coffee. He lifted his in return. To mutual suffering. They drank. The power came back on at 0430 with all the enthusiasm of a reluctant bureaucrat. Lights blinked to life, one section at a time. Systems rebooted. Consoles chirped indignantly at having been ignored. Somewhere in the engineering wing, someone cheered, followed immediately by a loud bang and a shout about reverse polarity and not again, you idiot. Reese was still in the common room, now awkwardly illuminated by full overhead lights. He squinted against the brightness and looked across the table. Kaleth had fallen asleep sometime around hour 3, head tilted back against the wall, mouth barely open. Her posture was too perfect even in unconsciousness, as if her spine had been designed by a military architect. He considered waking her, then he didn't. Instead, he quietly retrieved the empty coffee cups, tossed the remains of the ration bar into the recycler, and checked the wall screen. Still locked out of external comms. They were technically back online, but the command uplink hadn't reestablished. Either that or someone upstairs didn't want to talk. Neither would have surprised him. Kaleth stirred. One eye opened. You stayed. I considered leaving. but I figured if you woke up alone, you'd assume I abandoned you and ripped someone's arms off. That's fair. Also, you snore. Her brow furrowed. I do not. Like a malfunctioning plasma engine. A moment of silence. Then with the smallest twitch of a corner lip, almost imperceptible, she replied, I hope it haunts you. He grinned. Already does. The door opened. Jenkins entered, his hair sticking up on one side. Uniform rumpled like he'd slept in the laundry chute. Well, this is cozy, he said, glancing between them. Should I come back later, or should I make popcorn? Caleth arched an eyebrow. Reese gave him a flat look. Report. Command link's still down. Systems are up, but half the sensors are glitching. Medbay says the other two Elari are stable but unconscious. Also, Ven sat on the portable scanner, and now it keeps broadcasting his heartbeat on every channel. Caleth tilted her head. Your base is efficient. It's got character, Reese muttered. And chronic dysfunction, Jenkins added. Reese stood. I want a full scan of the wreck site before another scavenger crew gets there. We missed something. Something's not adding up. Caleth stood as well. You're assuming the crash wasn't an accident. I'm assuming you don't do anything by accident. Jenkins whistled softly. Careful, sir. That sounded almost like admiration. Reese ignored him and headed for the exit. Caleth followed without being told. Jenkins trailed behind, muttering something about needing hazard pay. The vehicle bay was half frozen from the night cycle. Reese climbed into the lead scout transport, an old atmospheric rover nicknamed the Brick for both its shape and maneuverability. Jenkins grumbled as he climbed in the back. Caleth sat in the passenger seat, buckling herself in with the precise grace of someone who had survived many vehicles with worse odds. The ride across the canyon basin was bumpy, filled with static interference from the planet's unstable magnetic field. Reese drove one-handed, checking the holo map with the other. He glanced at Caleth. You sure you want to see the crash site again? I don't avoid pain. I evaluate it. That's the most emotionally repressed way I've ever heard someone say yes. I learn from the best. Jenkins leaned forward. Are you flirting? Is this what interspecies tension sounds like? Reese didn't answer. Kayla said, if I were flirting, you would know. The silence after that was impressively thick. They reached the wreckage just after local dawn. The sun here was a dull bronze disk, filtering light through chemical haze. The Alari ship hadn't changed, still cracked open like a ruptured beetle, parts of it fused with the surrounding rock. Reese approached first, scanning with a rebuilt handheld rig. Ven's scanner's still broadcasting his heartbeat, by the way. He's either jogging in circles or extremely nervous. Caleth moved toward the ship's core. This section housed the memory core. It should have survived impact. Jenkins kicked at a piece of debris. Should have? Caleth ignored him. She touched a panel, her fingers glowing faintly, and a recessed compartment hissed open. Inside was a crystal sphere, fractured and blackened. She pulled it free with careful hands. This held the flight data and communications. Reese stepped closer. Can it be read? Not in this state. We've got a lab. She was already walking back toward the transport. Back at base, the crystal was placed into an interface array. Sparks jumped along its surface. Then a series of fractured images flashed across the screen. An Alari fleet in retreat, coded signals in Alari script, a distant explosion. Kayla's voice was calm. This isn't a mission record. It's a message, a warning. Reese leaned in. From who? She paused. Me. Past you. Future me. Or a version of me that didn't survive. Jenkins blinked. Okay, new rule. If someone brings a time message from their alternate self, they should start with that. Caleth's expression remained unreadable. This message was embedded in the nav core by override code. I only know one person with access to that code. Reese waited. My sister. Jenkins leaned back. Great. There's two of you. She was on a classified assignment, deep infiltration behind Terran lines. If she sent this, something is coming. Reese crossed his arms. Something worse than war? Something that ends war by making it irrelevant. Jenkins tried to lighten the mood. Like universal dance parties? Caleth didn't smile. Reese didn't either. Jenkins stood in the corridor holding a breakfast burrito and staring at the flashing red text on the console. He squinted, took a bite, and chewed slowly, as though somehow that would make the data less terrifying. "Hey, Reese," he called without taking his eyes off the screen. "Do you remember how I said I wanted something interesting to happen today?" Reese appeared in the doorway, half dressed in a field uniform, still drying his hair with a rag. "Number, but go on." "I regret it, deeply, passionately, with all the fire of 1,000 exploding moons." Reese walked over and looked at the screen. The text was alien, literally pulsing with an encryption pattern that pulsed like a heartbeat. Kalith stood behind them, arms folded, eyes narrowed. She didn't speak for a long time. "That's her code," she said. "My sister's. But it's not just a message. It's a beacon." Reese scratched his chin. "You mean someone's calling her?" "Number someone's calling what she found." Jenkins swallowed the last of the burrito. "Please tell me it's not an ancient doom machine, because we've had 2 of those this year, and they always end with me in the med bay with a broken limb and emotional trauma." Kalith moved closer to the terminal. "She wouldn't send this unless she was compromised, or dead." Reese crossed his arms. What exactly was her mission? Tracking a weapon of origin unknown designation, one that didn't follow known physics. Jenkins held up a hand. "Wait, are we talking singularity level? Quantum collapse? Planet eater? Emotion harvester? We have a whole betting pool in engineering." "She called it the breath engine." Reese blinked. "That sounds poetic." She wasn't. They ran the signal through the translation matrix, and for a few minutes, the room filled with the low whine of decrypting pulses and the occasional curse from the system AI, which had developed sarcasm after too many reboots. Jenkins tapped his earpiece. We've got atmospheric anomalies. Local cloud density just tripled, and the magnetosphere is twitching like it owes someone money." Kayla said nothing. Her eyes were locked on the screen as the final lines of code resolved into coordinates. Coordinates deep within the contested zone between Terran and Ilari territory. Reese leaned in. "That's a war graveyard. Everything that goes in there gets shredded by autonomous drones. Why would your sister send you there?" Kalith turned toward him. "Because it's hidden in plain sight. If you want to bury a god, you do it where only the dead go." Jenkins muttered, "You people need better metaphors." An hour later, Reese stood beside the launch pad while Jenkins loaded the last of the mission packs. Kalith adjusted the calibrations on her new field suit, a hybrid of Terran armor and Ilari tech. Reese tried not to stare at the glowing nodes along her spine interface. Jenkins slapped the side of the ship. "I made some modifications to the nav systems, so if we crash again, at least we'll do it with better playlists." Reese climbed aboard. "What's on them?" Jenkins grinned. "Mostly dramatic orchestra stuff, a little Terran pop, and one recording of Kalith saying, 'You're all going to die,' on a loop." Kalith blinked. "I never said that." "I edited it together from 5 different things you did say. It's very convincing." The ship launched smoothly. Reese piloted while Kalith took the co-pilot seat, navigating with a precision that Reese found both admirable and mildly threatening. The war zone loomed ahead, a massive stretch of space littered with dead satellites, broken ships, and roving AI defense units with abandonment issues. Jenkins, seated behind them, hummed cheerfully. "You know, if we die in here, at least we'll be remembered as incredibly dumb." Kalith answered without looking back. "I don't intend to die." "Me neither. I've got a date with someone who thinks I'm taller than I actually am." They slipped past the first drone cluster using a stealth pulse that Kalith generated manually. The AI units drifted past them like wolves distracted by a decoy scent. Reese exhaled. "That actually worked. Remind me to stop underestimating you." Kalith glanced at him. "I prefer it when people do." They reached the coordinates without incident, which was disturbing in itself. The space around the location was unnaturally quiet, like the eye of a storm that had forgotten it was supposed to move. The breath engine wasn't a machine in the traditional sense. It was a sphere the size of a dropship, made of overlapping geometries that defied visual focus. Reese stared at it through the viewport, and immediately felt like his brain had tried to exit his skull through his ears. Jenkins looked pale. Okay, south, we found it. Now what? Caleth opened a channel, her voice steady. If she left the key, it will be in the signal tethered to the engine's core. We have to interface directly. Reese frowned. Define interface. Mentally, Jenkins raised a hand again. Okay, I vote no. Anyone else? No? Okay, I'll just prepare the sedatives now. Caleth placed a hand against the control sphere inside the cockpit. The console shimmered, reshaped itself into a spiraling glyph that pulsed with an organic rhythm. She closed her eyes. Reese grabbed her shoulder. Are you sure about this? She didn't open her eyes. Number. But that's never stopped me. She connected. The ship trembled. Outside, the breath engine stirred. Caleth didn't speak for 8 whole minutes after she disengaged from the interface. Reese had counted, mostly to distract himself from the low thrum now vibrating through the hull. The breath engine hovered silently outside the ship, not moving, not pulsing, just watching. If a weapon could watch, if a geometry-defying anomaly of impossible origin could judge you silently for your fashion choices and life mistakes. Jenkins broke the silence. So, we all heard the voice, right? The one that said, I have awakened and I hunger for purpose? That wasn't just in my head, Caleth exhaled. It's alive. Cool. Definitely not terrifying. Reese kept his eyes on her. Did your sister leave a message? Caleth nodded slowly. She left herself. Jenkins blinked. I feel like I should ask what you mean by that, but I'm not going to like the answer. She uploaded her consciousness into the engine's threshold layer to stop it from fully activating. It recognized her mind as compatible and decided she was acceptable company. So it paused. It has been paused for 6 cycles. Reese stared. Your sister is babysitting a reality-warping god machine. She said it was bored. That's why it started reaching out again. Jenkins gave a strangled laugh. Right. Sure. Just a cosmic entity craving social interaction. Next, it'll want a blog and a vintage coffee subscription. Caleth touched the side of the interface again. It asked me a question. It asked what we are worth. Reese stepped closer. And? I told it. We are unfinished. That we are flawed. That we destroy because we don't know what else to do. But that some of us are trying. That we have potential. Jenkins muttered, Wow. Really going with the space therapy approach. Caleth glanced at Reese. It accepted that answer. It is going back to sleep. But only for a time. It said the next answer must be better. Reese rubbed his face. So we've just put a galactic apocalypse on a snooze button. For now. They watched the breath engine fold in on itself, collapsing through space without a ripple. Like reality gave it a polite nod and stepped aside. Jenkins made a note in his datapad. Do not disturb until humanity matures emotionally. On the return flight, silence didn't feel so heavy. Caleth sat beside Reese, her eyes closed, not from exhaustion, but from peace, however temporary. Reese leaned back in the pilot's seat. You know, he said, if you ever want to lie to command about what just happened, I'd be fine with that. Something like, oh, the anomaly was a big balloon full of angry bees. We bravely popped it. Very heroic, Caleth opened one eye. They would never believe you were heroic. That hurts, but it's also fair. Jenkins chimed in from the back. I'm just writing, routine recovery mission, no existential crises, minor lunch mishap. That should pass inspection. On the return flight, silence didn't feel so heavy. Caleth sat beside Reese, her eyes closed, not from exhaustion, but from peace, however temporary. Reese leaned back in the pilot's seat. You know, he said, if you ever want to lie to command about what just happened, I'd be fine with that. Something like, oh, the anomaly was a big balloon full of angry bees. We bravely popped it. Very heroic. Caleth opened one eye. They would never believe you were heroic. That hurts, but it's also fair. Jenkins chimed in from the back. I'm just writing, routine recovery mission, no existential crises, Minor lunch mishap. That should pass inspection. When they landed back at the base, the atmosphere was warmer. Not just from the weather, which had apparently stopped trying to kill them, but from the people. The engineers clapped when Jenkins returned, mostly because they assumed he hadn't survived. Reese was met with a rare handshake from the head medic and a coffee with extra sugar from a technician who still owed him a favor. Kalith walked the perimeter of the base once, alone. Then she found Reese leaning against a cargo crate, looking out at the horizon, arms crossed like he was afraid it might get ideas again. "You didn't run," she said. "I was busy. Also, the ship's keys were missing." She stepped closer. "When I first met you, I thought you were another weapon. A sharp thing built to be pointed at enemies." He smiled. "Still might be. But now I see a man who watches before he strikes, who questions, who hopes." That sounds suspiciously like a compliment. "I'm still calibrating." He turned to face her. "What will you do now?" "There are others like the engine. Not as powerful, but dangerous. I need to find them before someone else does." "You always talk like you're already leaving." "I always expect to be." "Well," he said after a long pause, "I've got nothing better to do. I hear chasing rogue alien tech is great for cardio." She smiled. Not wide, not bright, but real. The first time he'd seen it. Jenkins passed by carrying a crate labeled, "Definitely not explosives," and muttered, "If you two start kissing, I swear I'll eject myself into space." Reese ignored him. "So, partners?" Kalith extended her hand. He took it. The grip was firm. Warm. Behind them, the stars turned quietly in their endless math. Somewhere deep in that silence, the breath engine waited, dreaming strange dreams of broken people who were trying to fix themselves. And for now, that was enough.